Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
I want to talk more about the oil markets and the impact that the Iran attack might have on them with Ellen Wald, president of Transversal Consulting. So, Ellen, I want to just start with OPEC Plus because they already responded pretty quickly by increasing quotas slightly. Not a major output hike, but is this really more symbolic than anything else?
Yeah, I think that what we saw from the output hike and the swiftness with which they did this was really a signal to the market that should there be any kind of major disruptions, that OPEC is absolutely willing to hike production very swiftly to accommodate that. Now, obviously, the big question is, well, if the major oil producers here, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, if they're experiencing any kind of disruptions to both either their oil infrastructure or just the ability to get that oil out of the Middle East, that may not be all that helpful. And we're really going to see reliance on places like Kazakhstan, for example, to increase output.
How do producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE factor into market stability in this scenario?
So I would say they're really key right now. What's interesting is that both the UAE and Saudi Arabia don't rely 100% on the Persian Gulf to get their oil out. So Kuwait, most of Iraq, and they are almost entirely reliant really on the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia does have a way to get oil out through the Red Sea, and the UAE has pipelines that go around the Strait of Hormuz. But still, a lot of their oil is still set up, and oil products as well, to go out through the Strait of Hormuz. And we've seen, as you mentioned, that tanker rates are sky high. So, even if there is no, direct threat from Iran, it's still too expensive to send a tanker through the strait, either to pick up oil or to get it out. And so this is really causing a standstill that, if it continues for, a week or even two, could really start to cause major problems.
Ellen, if there is a winner in all of this, you say that would be Russia, at least in the short term, right? Because I guess its oil would be able to flow unobstructed to its biggest oil consumer, which is China.
Exactly. China is really, it has the biggest problem with oil not being able to get out of the Persian Gulf because it consumes a huge amount from there. But it also consumes a large amount of Russian oil, and it can get that oil without having to go through the Persian Gulf. So I would not be surprised if, this continues to see China increasing its imports from Russia even more. And as oil prices go up, Putin can also charge more for his oil. So he is definitely looking at this as, there's more money in his pocketbook now, and he's potentially got another more space to sell his oil to the customers that will buy it. Another question is, will India, which recently committed to stop buying Russian oil, feel that it needs to go back to purchasing Russian oil to offset the losses that it's suffering because it can't get oil from the Persian Gulf?
What are some key potential red flags that you'd be watching in the coming weeks in terms of oil markets?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue I think we're looking for right now, I think spikes in natural gas prices in Europe and also in Japan and in other Asian countries. Qatar has shut down its LNG plants, and they're a major supplier to Asia. And so, we're going to be looking for big spikes there. And then as well, we're talking not just crude oil, but also products are major things that are going through the Strait of Hormuz. And so it will be very important to keep an eye on that, particularly Asia, China, Japan, South Korea. These are all countries that get huge amounts of these vital products from the Middle East. And so I'd be keeping a very close eye on what China's doing. I know that they recently started talking to the Iranians. It will be interesting to see if they try to bring their economic leverage to push the Iranians to kind of bring this to a swifter resolution.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Intelligence coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
We did hear earlier, though, Norah, from the Defense Secretary, from the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff about this Operation Epic Fury. Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, saying that Iran had a gun to our head as he defended this attack.
Right. And there was also some discussion about the fact that Hegseth saying that he didn't want to say too much in terms of granularities as to not expose some of their plans to, quote, the enemy. So that's also been something that we are keeping an eye on. But to talk about this and more, we're joined by Dr. Ariel Cohen, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. There's been a lot of developments happening, a lot of things that happened through the weekend, and we're really seeing a lot of it spilling into today on Monday. Talk to us about what you're watching and what your main takeaways are of all these geopolitical tensions.
The first takeaway is how radically the character of war has changed. If you think about World War I, World War II, even Vietnam, warring parties did not go to take out the leadership of the opposing country on the first day. We did, and we did it. Secondly, the two things I'm watching very carefully is whether or not the U.S. Navy and the allies, including the Arab countries right in the Gulf, can secure the shipment of oil through the Strait of Hormuz. For now, for first couple of days, the shipment dropped, the oil prices went to 80. Our economy can live with oil at 80. It lived with oil at much higher prices. However, if it goes on for weeks and months, that's a different story because 20+% of global oil and good amount of LNG, liquefied natural gas, ship through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a narrow strait. It's something like 2 miles or something like that. Now, luckily, there's a lot of product. There is oil that Saudi Arabia can ship to the Red Sea. Now, there's a problem with the Red Sea because of the Houthis, and Houthis are supported and equipped and trained by Iran. So you see the vicious circle here. So the strategic goal is to enact enough damage to the ruling regime in Iran so the transition to a non-Islamist regime, non-IRGC dominated regime starts to happen. And I think it's too early to tell whether or not this is going to happen, how fast and how messy it's going to be. Iran is messy historically and probably is going to be messy now. And finally, I'm watching the amounts of ammo the U.S. and the Israelis are shooting, be it missile defense, be it rockets, offensive rockets, bombs, etc. Because all this equipment is very expensive. This is why folks are investing in weapons companies. And the Pentagon, the U.S., needs a strategic supply of these weapon systems in Europe, in the Pacific, just in case. And this is a three-theater circus, three circus show that we're watching because certain amount of these weapon systems need to be preserved for Europe and for the Pacific.
And Dr. Cohen, when we look at what happens now, what happens next, right? What will the new regime in Iran look like? Even President Trump said that his picks for the next leader has been killed. So what can we expect from the new regime, and will it be any better and friendlier to global relations than the prior regime?
The main question is whether IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, are going to stay in power. This is a combination of the military, elite military, and secret police. So imagine the SS and Waffen-SS in Nazi Germany, or KGB and internal security troops in the Soviet Union. It is a characteristic of a totalitarian state where you have a merger of internal security and the military. The regular military, the Artesh, has not stepped in yet. And I believe that the U.S. and Israel are talking to folks inside Iran, be it supporters of the Shah. We heard chants for Reza Shah Pahlavi, heir of the throne, the son of the last Shah, be it reformers. So there are a lot of people, how these people can sit together and rule Iran. That's a big question. But the elites, the urban folks, the educated folks, all repudiated the current theocratic dictatorship that killed 30,000 of their own people.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Intelligence coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
But continuing on in this conversation, we'd like to talk with Wayne Sanders. He's Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Defense Weapons Analyst. I've been keeping an eye, Wayne, on some of the stocks moving, at least in terms of some of the U.S. defense names, and we're seeing them rallying on the day. Not too much of a surprise. What's your takeaway from the developments here and as this relates to weaponry more broadly?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. We put out some research over the weekend. One of the biggest things that we've noticed, right? U.S. defense primes like Lockheed, RTX, and Northrop, they're really at the center of the air missile defense and strike capabilities that are underscored by the U.S.-Israel campaign against Iran right now. And so it's being able to show that crewed systems, piloted systems continue to be at the forefront of this, right? F-22s, F-16s, F-15 Strike Eagle, and the F-35, obviously, for air dominance. All of these have played a really critical role in here. It starts to show that the work into stealth technology continues to be one of the key pieces that's going to continue to be pressed. They're proving their nature. They're proving their importance to it. And then you're also seeing that from a naval power. It ends up continuing to be a very powerful button for the president to use to be able to bring up these the carrier strike groups, to go out there, aircraft carriers along with these guided missile destroyers, to be able to provide not only a level of air defense, but then also air superiority as well as long-range strike capability.
And Wayne, this morning we got word from the U.S. that U.S. jets were shot down over Kuwait in apparent friendly fire, in a friendly fire incident. Thankfully, the crew that were in those jets were able to jettison out of them. And last we heard, they're in stable condition at a hospital. But can you tell us more about those jets and what was destroyed there?
Yeah, when you look at some of the F-15 capabilities and all that, right? Air defense is normally, right, they come as different pieces. You have a radar system that's actually used specifically to identify the signal itself. Then you have to be able to put it together with an interceptor that's going to be able to shoot it down. And so what happened in some of these is I believe that the radars themselves, when you try to differentiate, identify friend versus foe, ends up being a key piece of this, right? There are specific signatures that different aircraft comes on. If you override that and you shoot at it anyway, it's something that can be on there. But all the pilots are safe, even though these aircraft were affected.
So how would you characterize Iran's current missile and drone capabilities, especially the ones that are being used in this war?
Yeah, looking through some of the U.S. CENTCOM data and all that, right? I think right now you're looking at Iran having below 1,500 missiles total for these short-range ballistic missiles and medium-range ballistic missiles. But the bigger tell there is actually on the missile launchers themselves, because you're looking at somewhere between 100 to 150 missile launchers total. Doesn't do any good to have a missile if you can't get it in the air. And so the U.S. and Israel have been very, very effective at targeting the stockpiles for the missiles themselves, but also the launchers that shoot them. And then the air defense capabilities have been very much decimated at this point in time, which is why you see so many F-22s, F-15s, F-16s that are and F-35s that are able to fly somewhat unimpeded in that area.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Intelligence coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
One of the big questions now is what happens next in the war with Iran and with regime change there. And Senator Mark Warner, who's a member of the Gang of Eight, spoke with Bloomberg this weekend on Sunday, and he said there are still questions about what comes next for Iran.
Is the goal Iran's nuclear capability? Is it the ballistic missiles, regime change? And let me acknowledge the fact that the Iranian leadership, the supreme leader's taken out. I mean, that is good news. I mean, this regime is awful. But I can tell you from the intelligence standpoint, we don't have great visibility about who or what comes next.
And we're going to put that question now to our next guest, Edward Price, non-resident senior fellow at NYU on Iran, joining us here in the studio. And I mean, I guess that really is the question, right? What comes next? Because what comes next could write the script for decades to come in the Middle East.
I think that's correct, but there is no script, right? I mean, this is regime change light, L-I-T-E, right? All of the caffeine, none of the sugar. And in plan A, we're going to go and kill the bad guy, which, by the way, if you give me a chance, I'll argue is a good thing. But there is no plan B. And so this is maybe a reaction long term to the war on terror and 20 years of pootling around in the Middle East for no good reason. And I think that it's something that we as American citizens should think very carefully about, because we're not spreading democracy so much as we are making the world safer for democracy.
Well, I do want to touch on this redhead crossing the Bloomberg terminal. The UAE and Qatar lobby allies to persuade Trump to end Iran war soon. Going back to our conversation with Ed Price here, I wanted to talk about whether or not, do you think that diplomacy could still realistically de-escalate this conflict?
No.
Because
No way.
Trump has said Iran wants to speak. They want to come back to the table. Do we believe this?
I mean, they always want to come back to the table, but let's get down to, brass tacks. Iran has effectively been at war with the West for some 50 years. It has been undermining our society, funding terror. October the 7th, by the way, has Iran's fingerprint all over it. So they started a war that they can't finish, and now they want to talk. I mean, that's absurd.
Earlier, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, in the first press conference we really had since the war this weekend, basically said, when asked, why now? He said it's 47 years of a violent regime, of a belligerent Iran. He said, we didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. So in terms of timing, is this just because they were able to get the Ayatollah and his leaders in one place at one time and saw opportunity?
Yeah, and why not? Frankly, I mean, this is effectively the United States fighting and winning World War III before World War III needs to be fought and won. And it's very uncomfortable for Western populations because we all grew up on the first mover of Adolf Hitler. And we think that moving first is morally wrong somehow. But I would remind your audience that international law is a sub-function of Western morality. Western morality is not a sub-function of international law. So if we've created a situation for a terror state to, again, murder people on October 7th, unprovoked, and they get murdered themselves and they want to talk. Again, I repeat myself, it's absurd.
You say that there is a foot race between using our hard power today and losing our soft power, including the dollar standard tomorrow. Explain that.
Well, I think what we're witnessing are two funerals. The funeral of Iran's rule of terror, and that's a good thing. And then, of course, the funeral of the international rule of law, which is a mixed bag. I just suggested that if international law is not working to keep us safe, then it should be revisited. But breaking international law in so brazen a way also encourages our adversaries to do the same. And ultimately, what I mean about the dollar is that we live off of our soft power. We have alliances. People lend us a lot of money that is used to buy very nice kit that we saw in the last few days being used. And so ultimately, if we lose our trust, if we lose our soft power, that will reflect in the amount of money that people are willing to lend us.
I'm just looking at your notes here, Ed. You say Trump at home is as dangerous to our republic as Trump abroad is as powerful for the West. Just tell us more about that.
I mean, this is the ultimate confusion, right? So someone like me, small L liberal, very, very hand-wringing about Trump for the last decade. And I've said before that I think he's encouraging forces in our country that are pre-1776. They're the sort of forces that don't necessarily believe in the rule of law at home. One example, if I had to say as an immigrant to this country, as a naturalized citizen, what I think the United States is in its essence, I would say no secret police. And yet we have ICE on the streets. So there's one example of what I mean about the domestic problem in the Republic with President Trump. On the other hand, again, I'm confused because abroad, he's kind of hitting it out of the ballpark right now. He's crushing our enemies. He's confiscating communists. And he's taking out the bad guys. So what we would really want to see, I think, is something closer to the rule of law at home, even if we're going to, as I say, fight and win World War III before it needs to be fought. But there will be a cost to this kind of delinquent behavior.
What do you think of the potential ripple effects of this? I mean, we've already seen it kind of spreading in terms of the Gulf more broadly, but I'm curious what you think maybe the extra layers may be.
Well, if we do it properly and we truly crush the Iranian regime, good things will happen, right? I mean, for one, there will be freedom for women in that country. They've been oppressed, brutally so, for decades. If you're asking about second-order effects in the wider regime and in the wider region, I should say, I always imagine the Ukraine war and the war with Iran as one war, right? If you just flip the map on its side.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
You can see quite clearly that it's one theater, right? And you've got Kaliningrad, you've got Poland and Ukraine and then Iran, and they're all in a very similar area. Now, why is that? Because the Russians are pushing forward. And in Russian history, they always push forward to the sea. They need warm water ports. Maybe that will change with climate change. But that's why they're allied with it. Yeah, that's why they're allied with Iran, and Iran needs Russian support. So the first second-order effect I think about is in the Kremlin and what Putin is thinking about the loss of an ally, the potential loss of Iran.
I'm not asking you to get into President Trump's head, but he has, in the past, criticized U.S. presidents for military intervention that resulted in the removal of a world leader. He said that it would destabilize the region and fuel terrorism. He's now president, and maybe to him the world looks different. But why do you think because it really is quite an about face?
I mean, President Trump is the master of the about face, right? I mean, the stuff that comes out of his mouth, you can't keep up with it. You need one of those FBI walls with the string and the sticky notes, right? It's too difficult. But I think the key difference is boots on the ground. And if we go back to the global war on terror, we committed our land forces to a region that ultimately didn't want us there. I mean, it's better now than it was 20 years ago, but I'll stand by this until I'm dead. The Iraq war was a huge mistake, mistake.
And Trump said that as well.
And he was right. Yep. Okay, we should have hit Iran 25 years ago, frankly. So it's a complex picture. But if we are now at a point in our history where we have the complex technology such that, as you say, we can find all these bad guys in one room and with the help of Israel, take them out, why not?
I kind of want to continue with the theme of previous Middle East conflicts. What have you taken away from historical patterns or what we've seen in history and what's being present today or maybe not present?
Well, I mean, as a Brit, there's a lot of history that the British are responsible for. And there are a lot of, I mean, we don't need to go into the history of Sykes-Picot, but there's a lot of lines in that area that are not necessarily helpful to that region. And I think that the previous imperial era that we were in had a very clear objective, which was to avoid a single Arab power. Right. So that's why there's a lot of different countries in that region. And I think that they've been arguing about that ever since. And of course, there's also the split in Islam. Right. So Iran is not mainstream Islam and has to come up with other reasons to be relevant on the Arab street. They're not Arabs. So probably a long-term trend towards less chaos. I say that tentatively and hopefully. But of course, it's a place that has a lot of wars. And we've seen Afghanistan, Pakistan recently. So I don't expect that to stop soon.
Speaking of Britain, they have thrown their support behind the U.S. and Israel. I believe so has Germany and France. Do you see how might their participation, what might their active participation look like?
It's not even leading from behind, is it, with the current European Union and the UK? I mean, I'm very disappointed in the British Prime Minister. I feel like he's waiting for the British Prime Minister to tell him what to do. It's really not the way to do it. Let me answer that by saying what I'd like to see, which is a full-throated Western alliance against this regime in Iran that has been terrorizing us and Israel for years. Get together, sort it out properly, and get fully involved. I mean, Germany needs to rearm anyway.
I'm hearing, though, from others saying, the new regime may not be any better than the regime we just took out. What are your thoughts on that?
It may not be any better, but it will certainly be more scared.
More scared.
Oh, yeah.
Scared.
Oh, yeah. So now there's a lot of stick going on and a lot less carrot.
This is the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.